All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I know we may have some people join in after the fact, and for those of you that are watching this after the event and in the recording, welcome to you as well. My name is Allison Lyon. I'm the Assistant Director of New Student and Family Programs for Georgia Southern University. And on behalf of Family Programs, welcome to our monthly Family Zoom session. This evening, we're going to be talking with our fellow colleagues in academic affairs and a faculty member as well, and talking a little bit about your students' experience and making sure we take some time this evening to answer any questions that you may have. But first and foremost, I always have to do this. I'm going to do shameless plugs for a lot of things that come out of family programs. So with that on my screen, I just wanted to share a new website that recently was revamped and launched about, I actually think it was last week. So on the main Georgia Southern website, up at the very top, there's an icon for parents and families. Just a reminder that this is a resource for you. It can be really hard to remember all the website addresses for certain things to find, but it's very quick and easy to access right there on our website. On this website, there are a couple new things that I want to point out to you. So first and foremost, you can now meet our team. So get to know the individuals that are here to support you in family programs. Also in February, we did launch our very first communication plan for our family members and supporters of our Georgia Southern students. So we send out several communications a month. So if your student is currently enrolled and you're not receiving those messages from us, so that would be a monthly newsletter, our messages from our president, Dr. Marrero, you can actually opt into that communication. So that is on our website. And then of course on the top right is, like the event that you might have found this evening, is our family events. And so we do monthly Zoom sessions every month. We've been doing this since August, and they've been really great to connect with you, make sure we're connecting you to other departments. We do have one more for the remainder of the spring semester, and that will be in April with university housing. So we definitely encourage for you to sign up for that session if that's going to be of interest to you. Further down this page, if you were to scroll, are a lot of really great resources. We're going to be talking about academics a lot tonight. There's a whole academic section as well with a lot of great links to a lot of different departments, support services, and things you might want to know to best support your student. So definitely encourage you spending some time navigating this website, learning a little bit more about it. But of course, we can always be reached at familyprograms@georgiasouthern.edu. We are also on Facebook and we're pretty active. So follow us on Facebook. Don't ever hesitate to send us a message. I'm trying to communicate with you in a wide variety of ways. So we appreciate you joining us this evening. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. This evening, we're going to do things a little bit different. If you have attended one of our sessions before, we normally have a formal presentation to share with you, and then we go into some Q&A. But this type of session will probably do best for Q&A. So before I introduce our great panelists that are here with us this evening, I want to talk about ways that you can engage with us this evening. So as you've already seen in the chat feature, Shivani Patel, our graduate assistant, is going to be dropping any links to anything that maybe we refer to throughout the evening that will give you quick access and hopefully be successful for you in finding those things if you need it and it was something of interest. But you should see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A feature. So at this point in time, we can't see you, but you can see us. And we can communicate through this Q&A feature. Please drop any questions that you have throughout the evening. I know several of us that are on this panel, we could probably talk for hours if we were allowed to, and I'm one of those to be included. So I'm really throwing myself under the bus there. Dustin kind of had a grin, so. But we definitely want to hear questions from you this evening to make sure we're addressing things that you might have questions about. If we can't address something or maybe we don't know, we will find the answer for you and get you connected. So we want to make sure you feel great leaving this session this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to do a very brief introduction of our panelists, but I would like them to maybe introduce themselves a little bit more in depth about kind of what they do in their jobs and maybe how long they've been with Georgia Southern. But our panelists this evening, we have Dr. Diana Cohn. She is currently our Vice Provost in Academic Affairs. Then we have Dr. Christine Ludwise, who is our Associate Provost for Student Success. And then, last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Dustin Anderson. He is representing our faculty this evening from the College of Arts and Humanities. So if we can, panelists, I'm going to kind of go in the order that you're on my screen. If you can, just do a little bit more of an introduction about yourself. So we'll start with Dr. Cohn.
Good evening. It's glad to have you with us tonight and hope we can answer some questions for you. I guess I'm the long-term person tonight. I've been at Georgia Southern for 30 years and loved every minute of it. Came here thinking I might be 4 or 5 year term and have stayed ever since. So it's a great place to connect with people, students, faculty, colleagues, and I've really enjoyed it. In my role as the Vice Provost, I typically oversee a lot of the faculty issues related to the curriculum, anything related to the faculty. And then I also handle the student appeals that come forward to the provost. So if a student has a grade appeal or an issue that they can't get resolved through their instructor or the department chair or dean, and they come to the provost, those are some that I review and help make the decisions on those. So hopefully they're not always something the student's done wrong, is the student just doesn't know where to seek help, and so they come to the provost office and email us to provost@georgiasouthern.edu and we address them.
Right here, since Dr. Cohn's been here so long, she's probably going to have all the answers this evening. Or at least we're going to try, right?
That's right.
Next, Dr. Ludwise.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Ludwise, and I am Associate Provost for Student Success and Advising. In my role at Georgia Southern, I work with the student organizations. I work with the academic advising, academic success center, student athlete services. If there's a student and success in it anywhere, it comes to me. Like Dr. Cohn, I also work with students who are having concerns and issues. And we try and work as both an advocate for students, but also a bridge between students and faculty so they understand each other and where each are coming at when we look at different policies and procedures. I have not been here as long as Dr. Cohn, but I have been here at Georgia Southern for 20 years in various roles, moving up through the faculty and in various colleges. So I'm glad to have you with us tonight, and I look forward to your questions and a good conversation.
Great. And Dr. Anderson?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dustin Anderson. I can add some nice parity. I've only been here 10 years, so we're going in nice, even increments. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Literature. I came here from Florida State. I teach a wide variety of classes. I was recently our graduate program director in the department, teaching upper division courses with our majors, but I also spend quite a bit of time working with our core curriculum and really enjoy the time I spend working with students during FYE classes. I did a stint as our faculty senate president not long ago, so have a wide perspective on the way in which we deliver classes and what some of the philosophy is behind that, and have had the privilege to work with people in every college that we have represented, both academic and support. So not just our academic colleges, but the Honors College, our College of Graduate Studies, and the library as well. So I'm excited to field any kind of questions that anybody has. I'm an open book, so please fire away.
Great. Thank you all so much. So as we dropped in the chat, if you have questions, please put those in the Q&A feature, and we'll make sure that we ask those of our panelists, because again, I'm sure we can talk about things all night long, but we want to make sure it's most relevant to you. Well, while you ponder that first question, I will go ahead and throw a first one. So we do typically watch on Facebook to see what a lot of our supporters are asking consistently over time. I know a recent message just came out from President Marrero regarding summer and fall. So just didn't know if anybody could provide, in case anybody maybe didn't see that message, what our students can be expecting in class structure for summer and fall. Whoever wishes to take.
I can start with that, and then Dustin and Diana hopefully will join in. Normally, summer at Georgia Southern is predominantly online. That's been our norm for a number of years now. Students can take some classes face-to-face, but they often find it easier to go home, get a job, and take their classes away from Georgia Southern. The fall, right now, our plan is to be back on campus fully face-to-face. Usually during the semester, we offer about 65% of our classes face-to-face. We offer about 20% online, and then the others are a combination of hybrid or partially at a distance. As a students, we're hoping, big hope, that students will be back on campus and faculty and staff will be back on campus with hopefully very little social distancing now that we have vaccine efficacy, and we're starting to see that happen in Georgia. And so in some ways it's a wait and see, but our big hope is that we will all be back on campus and, experiencing our community in everything that it has to offer.
Yeah, like Dr. Ludwise said, summer is going to look pretty much back to normal for where we were pre-pandemic. I think in the fall, the way that I've been describing it to my students that they asked about it is, we're not going back to normal, and we're not going to be back better than ever. We're going to be smarter than we have before. I mean, every fall we run into things like flu and strep, and I think the kind of social learning process that we've had through this, regardless of whether we still have some of those mandates from the CDC or not, I think we're going to be much more attentive to the way in which we're engaging and how we're able to be flexible during those timeframes to kind of minimize some of that. I've worked with a lot of people over the last few months in building out different ways in which we can teach how to be flexible. I think we're going to see some new innovative approaches to this that will allow students who may come down with the flu, for instance, to still participate while they're recovering, or to build mechanisms in place to allow them to get caught up much more quickly than we'd ever been able to do before. So I think that's where we're looking as a faculty in the fall, as to where can we move forward from this at, if we are able to move back to a more purely face-to-face environment.
And I just piggyback on that. It's not only so that students can maybe toggle if they become ill or need to miss, but faculty, when we're allowed to travel, go to conferences, and sometimes, it's difficult to find a substitute to fill in that has the expertise. And with faculty now able to Zoom from wherever, they can still deliver their lectures if they're having to be gone, especially if they're going to a conference or something. And so I think it will improve the instructional process so that no one has to get behind in their schedule as we move forward.
That's a really great point. I think definitely in the past year, because now I think we're pretty much at a year. Crazy to say that statement, but we're at that point where it's like, wow, we've actually learned a lot and had to grow through this process. And I think it'll be better for our students and our faculty in the long run. So speaking a little bit about faculty engagement. So a lot of the times, students are going to come to their supporters saying, this class is difficult. I'm really struggling with X. And I know from prior experience, a lot of times the students aren't necessarily talking to their instructor. So do you have any advice for our supporters of conversations they can have at home to encourage the student to have that dialogue with their instructor in case maybe they're intimidating to them or whatever it may be?
I'm fine to lead off on that one. Both Dr. Cohn and Dr. Ludwise have significant experience with this too. We're people, and I think despite the fact that sometimes we seem a little bit at a distance or a remove, we all care about the same kinds of things, and there's not a single person that has joined our faculty that doesn't want their students by and large to succeed. So I think the more that you can do to create a personal relationship with that faculty member, and it doesn't really matter how big the class is. When you're an individual, it doesn't matter if there are 10 or 110 people in that room. We recognize and remember individuals. So not just coming up and saying, hey, my name is, but actually telling us something about who you are, what you care about, what you're interested in, helps us humanize the students as well, right? They're individuals that we're talking back and forth with, and having that one touch point makes it a lot easier to communicate. But we talk a lot about specific kinds of literatures and movies, and inevitably students tell me about the movies that they've watched recently or the Netflix show that they've seen. And that helps me remember kind of where we were in those conversations, even with big classes. But I think having something to help you stand apart as an individual is one piece. The other is to kind of have very specific questions in mind too. I think where a lot of that communication breakdown happens is I'm not exactly sure what I want to ask, and I've asked it in a way that's unclear, and I got an unclear answer back. And then that communication tends to crumble a little bit after that, right? It's frustrating not to get a clear answer. So I think kind of talking through what some of those questions are as a supporter, right? So as a family member, as a friend, as a parent, being able to talk through those and say, hey, if I ask this, what do you think I mean by that? That way they're entirely clear when they bring that question forward, and they're much more likely to get a clear, cogent answer back, or at least a start to that conversation where we can kind of pick apart where we need to move forward from it.
I would just add that I think that when we get back to a more normal type of environment, it makes it a little bit easier for students to interact with the faculty members. That right now, when we are doing a lot of the online and Zoom, they feel removed, and so they don't reach out as often. I've heard that through some of the student appeals that I'm receiving, as you know, well, I don't see my faculty member, and so I think they haven't reached out as much lately. It makes it easier when they do have some face-to-face contact, because oftentimes the faculty member can look and see somebody looks confused in the classroom and may reach out to them as well. But that's one aspect. And I think that the students shouldn't wait so long. I mean, if they realize in week 2, hey, I'm not really following a lot, don't wait so long. So that's where parents maybe can help prod them along and inquire, how are you feeling about your classes? And if they feel lost, go ahead and reach out, because oftentimes by the time they decide, it's too late in the semester to really catch up over many, many weeks where they have fallen behind. So don't wait. As soon as you feel lost, reach out. And when we get back into the fall and faculty are having regular office hours where students can just drop in, know at a certain time the faculty member will be available, I think that'll make it a little easier too. It's been kind of a struggle for some of our students this year.
I think I agree with everything Diana and Dustin have said. I would say that I would also encourage students to reach out and ask their instructor, by what means do they want me to communicate, right? Is it email? Is there a text? Is there, for each instructor, it can be different. But the other part of it is, just like students sometimes miss something in an email, sometimes they're out sick. If a student doesn't get a response from the faculty member, don't stop with that faculty member. Maybe it's, or wait for somebody for a long time. Maybe the faculty member was out sick one day and missed the email. Go ahead and email again. If you still don't get a response, there are folks like the department chair, the dean, who can help with that communication, because it may be, again, there's something wrong with the student's communication. There's something wrong with the faculty member's computer. We have email issues at Georgia Southern occasionally, and just make sure that there's not something broken in the process, but that students are also not just waiting and hoping. There are processes by which we can help also engage that communication should we need to.
I would just add one more thing, that it's not only the faculty members that they might want to reach out to if they're struggling, but their advisors are there to help them, not just to help them get their schedule, but they're there to help them. And oftentimes the student might feel a little more comfortable initially reaching out to their advisor because they've had more face-to-face time with that person. And then the advisor can also give them some advice on how to pose their questions or how to approach the faculty member if they're having some difficulties. And especially if they've reached out and they send an email and they don't hear back, then the advisor can sometimes help them streamline some of those issues.
I know, for some of you that know, so of course our department also runs SOAR orientation. So we just started mini-mester this week, if anybody knew that. So I know I was on with a student last night doing a small SOAR session, and they were really struggling with this idea that we talked through of, why don't you just email your instructor on the first day and introduce yourself? Just say hi. Because a lot of our students wait until things are crashing and burning. If you've ever seen that little icon, right, the little dog in the dumpster fire, they're kind of like that. But if you build that relationship early, right, I know you. I'm going to make sure I'm supporting you, and not supporting you, any of my students, right, but we're building that relationship as we go, not just when things are bad. So I think that can be an encouraging way to tell our students to also extend their olive branch to the instructors, because the instructors do have a lot of students, but they really do want to get to know the students. So it's a two-way street sometimes.
Yeah, asking for help is never a bad thing.
No.
I mean, it's not a sign of weakness or failure or anything else. I mean, we understand that what we do sometimes is complex, and we love talking about it. So anytime that there's an ask for help, it generally gets received very well. And like Allison said, doing that early on makes it so much easier later too.
I would just add, it doesn't mean you even ask for help. Sometimes you just want to say, hey, I really enjoyed what we did in class today, and reach out to the faculty member and let them know on the way out of class, hey, that was great, enjoyed the activity we did, or your lecture, or whatever. And then something Allison said about the mini-mester, if you're in a short-term class, it's very important, especially if you feel like you have questions and need help, reach out soon, if not sooner, because you have a very short window of time before it becomes too late. So summer and short-term classes, very important to reach out early.
Yeah. So you talk about that kind of reaching out early. And I think earlier, Dr. Cohn, you mentioned something too about important deadlines. What are maybe good times of the semester that our supporters should check in with their students? Because sometimes some students might be being really quiet, right, about how they're doing and how things are. Do you think that there's important times of the semester that our supporters should be checking in with their students?
Well, I think it's always important that students know when the last day to drop without academic penalty, because too often the day after is when they get a grade back, and then they're like, oh, I don't know if I should stay in this course or not. So we encourage faculty to reach out to students, give them progress along the way. But I would hope that if a faculty member sees a student is really struggling to be successful in the course, that they have reached out, or at least extended to the class, hey, if this is where you're falling, come see me, because we need to correct this to make you successful before the last day to drop, if you should need to drop the class.
And Dustin, I don't know, I was hearing some chatter from some faculty recently of some cool ways that they're trying to do office hours in this current virtual environment. What are ways that students maybe are seeing office hours right now? What does that look like for options for them?
Well, I mean, so it kind of runs the gambit. I mean, we have people who are meeting outside in outdoor spaces with students. I mean, today was a really nice day, so it was kind of ready-made for that. Where they are getting some of that safe distance, one-to-one environments. A lot are doing it over Zoom. We have a lot that kind of reached back to the classic telephone, which gets not enough props for actually what it is. I think one of the frustrating parts that we get with email is there's a lot of back and forth, right? I ask a question and I get a response, and then there's another question, another response, and we see those chains build. And it takes days sometimes to get to the answer that you want to get, as opposed to the 5-minute phone call. So I know that I've got a number of colleagues that said, hey, email me with some times that we can set up a phone call. Most are doing it through Zoom, but some are using it without the screen feature, using it more like a telephone. And the idea of just having that quick conversation sometimes really expedites what those issues are. And it's a chance to ask questions immediately. So there's a lot of clarity that comes out of that. And like Dr. Cohn said, that's what we have office hours for. during the kind of separation with the pandemic, but I'll be honest, even beforehand, I think there's still kind of a go-to, I'll just email about it. It's easier to drop an email in. And it's been my experience that that's not always the most fruitful way to do it. I think it's a great way to introduce. I really enjoyed class. I feel like I got a handle on this, but I've got some questions. I'd like to set up a time to come by and talk. And I think making those proposals, right? Read the syllabus. One of the office hours listed, I'd like to come by on Thursday at 2 because that's when your office hours are. And having something specific, it's easy for that faculty member to say, oh yeah, of course, right? I've got it in my calendar now. Again, as opposed to that back and forth. Well, which day would work better for you, et cetera. So taking a little bit of initiative in that, and I mean, taking control of that situation to say, this is when I want to talk to you about things. We read that as a desire, right? To engage and move forward. So those conversations I think are really, really helpful as opposed just to here's what was in the email. Now, again, if there's clarity issues, right? I need to know something specific. Email is not a bad thing, but sometimes that telephone call version works really well.
I would like to just add that faculty usually post their office hours in the syllabus, but students' schedules don't always mesh with those hours. And they need to know that faculty are available other times. Those are the times that they're going to say, I'm going to be in my office waiting for any students that need help. So if the hours don't conform to the student's schedule, please feel free to reach out to the faculty member and say, hey, I really need to come by and ask some questions. Are there any times on whatever days, slots that the student has available? I work on these days. I have class conflict during your office hours, but I really need to see you. And faculty are readily available. So don't feel like, hey, I can't reach out because I can't go during the designated office hours.
And I know a lot of the times, one of the things we try to talk about in SOAR a little bit is a student success team. And so, students have this ability to try to build this network around them of support. So of course the faculty are there and definitely the students should be reaching out, but acknowledging that all the education doesn't just stop in the classroom too, right? It's a lot of, taking advantage of academic success centers, so tutoring, things like that. We see a lot though that, at least I see this on the Facebook page, a good group, a lot of our supporters who are trying to find tutors, and sometimes it might be the Academic Success Center doesn't have tutoring in that subject. So we've tried to encourage that they connect with their faculty members, the faculty able to connect them to resources if maybe tutoring is not available in those broader networks.
So yes, generally. And sometimes that's actually creating a working group within the class or connecting a student to an upper class student who has done well in the class before. There are a lot of different mechanisms. Faculty, I know an awful lot of faculty who spend time with students, really working them through problems and processes themselves. So I think the presumption that the faculty are there to teach the class and then hand the student off to the support network. The faculty are part of that support network and often are engaging with students in a variety of support exercises, including leading study sessions, tutoring sessions, working with students on research questions that they have or problems. And so I think that students often look at adults and faculty. I'm going to use faculty in particular, but look at them. They've got, letters after their name. They're older than they are. They often, are standing up in front of a class. There's a difference there. But faculty are there to help students. And so it's getting over that little bit of, oh, I don't really want to talk to that adult person to get through it. And what they often find is that their faculty have really good senses of humor, that they're very supportive, that they're willing to work with students. And it's not as much of an onerous, activity as initially thought. And so I think part of it is making sure that students know that faculty are people too.
Dr. Ludwise, did I learn a nugget of knowledge I'm a little ashamed I did not know before? But because I used to work for Dr. Ludwise, so I should have known this. But I heard that the app and EAB Navigate has a thing called Study Buddies.
It absolutely does.
This sounds magical.
It's
Do you know
fabulous.
more, I just learned like today.
So that the Navigate app that we have, and that we're really pushing towards our first year students in particular, but it's available to, we have got all kinds of students in it, but it gives students opportunities using their course schedule to connect with other students and create study groups or study buddies. And it's a lovely opportunity for students to do their own networking and figure out, again, that teamwork approach where I might be really good at math and you're really good at English. And if we get together, we can actually help each other out.
Yeah, that was really cool. I wish I would have had that when I was in school. That would have helped me a ton versus my very archaic trying to just go meet someone and do my study buddy that way and hope you're in a class with me. Similar mentality. So that's really cool.
Allison, I will say it in terms of that, having that buddy goes a tremendous way with instructors, right? So I have a student come to me and say, I tried to work through this. And in fact, I talked to my roommate, I talked to my study partner about this, and I still couldn't come to an answer. And this is kind of where I'm stuck at. That tells us how active that the student is with this process, right? It's not just, hey, solve this problem for me. It shows I've been proactive in trying to work through this. I'm still struggling with it. I'm still not entirely clear. It's a whole different kind of conversation at that point because it goes immediately into problem solving mode because we know the student's in a solution oriented mindset then.
Changing gears a little bit, and I don't know if this is formed into a complete question, so you might have to bear with me. But knowing a lot of times we try to encourage our students to also consider looking for mentorship with our faculty members, but also maybe research opportunities, just other ways that they can engage other than just being in the class. So is there any information you have about like ways students can do that, or maybe examples of how that's looked with different programs?
So it varies by college and department. And I think we're building those kind of relationships early on is helpful. Like in the chemistry and math departments, they have something that's a little bit more systematic, where they're reaching out to first year students to say, these are some of the projects that we're working on. If you're interested, come and talk to us about it. In the humanities, it tends to be a little bit more passive. I see that this person's working on music composition this way, or this person has a philosophical approach like this, and the expectations that you might reach out to them. So I think asking the question, and maybe not necessarily just to the instructor, right? Like we heard before, there's a bigger support network. So if you know that the student's interested in English or interested in economics, it's also fine to reach out to the department chair too. And say, hey, I'm really kind of interested in this area in terms of research. Are there any projects that faculty are working on? Because it may not be that your student's in that class with a person that may share that interest. And that's where some of the most enriching mentorship relationships happen, is co-curricularly or actually extracurricularly. It's not just about the classroom stuff. Here's the thing that I'm really interested and passionate about. One of my favorite students ever was an engineering student who just happened to really like post-colonial lit. And Afad spent at least 2 hours a week in my office during office hours. He's at Boston College now, finishing a PhD, and we still keep in touch. Never had him in class, but it was just, he got connected through another colleague in the department. And it's really kind of one of those meaningful research relationships. So I think going to those support networks, advisors work the same way. The advisors know the faculty really well. They know what they work on, and they can give really good advice in terms of who might be working on something. The students are going to ask who I should take anyway with the advisor. If they're not telling you that, that's what they do, right? Who should I take? Who's good? Who's not? Have them plug that question in too, right? What kind of research are people working on? Are there projects that I could be part of? And service learning is a big part of this as well too, not just in terms of what we're doing with research and scholarship, but where are we engaging with the community at too? And a lot of times that's an easier way to get started to build that relationship.
I would just add that in my experience, a faculty member who serves as an advisor to a student organization that's in the major, the ones in your major, those faculty members are usually always wanting to work with students, they're being the faculty advisor. So a lot of times if you have an interest and you seek out those student organizations in your major, then the faculty members that are working can either, connect you because they know what some of the other faculty. So that would be a, kind of an extra way in which you might meet faculty members in your program area, get to know them and what they're working on and whether or not you want to collaborate on some projects.
I know it's been one of the conversations we've been having a lot of times, and a big regret for me as a college student is I didn't take the time to get to know my faculty more. And I got to the end of college and I was like, wow, I need like recommendations to do things, right? So building that relationship is super important. And then, yeah, you get to stay connected post-graduation, which is really great. So Judy has a question. So if your student is communicating with the instructor, but still having issues that they do not feel are getting resolved, what is the chain of communication for where to go next? Department chair, department head, and should the student worry about any recourse from the instructor? Of course, not wanting to get them in trouble, but if there's truly a conflict, where should they go first?
I think that's a great question. And that's a question that I think students struggle with a lot. It may be a grade appeal. It may just be a conflict. We usually tell folks, obviously start with the instructor. If that continues to be a problem, the next step for a student is to go to the department chair or the program head. And the department chair is actually easier because it's the person with the big office in the front of the department, right? You can find that. If a student continues to have problems and they still feel it's not getting resolved, there are other recourse, but the department chair is usually the best place to start. I will tell you that Georgia Southern has a very firm anti-retaliation policy. One of the best things your student can do if they're having a conflict with anyone, whether that's an instructor or an advisor or another student, is to disclose that to somebody in a position of authority, whether that's the dean of students office, the department chair, the dean, because that immediately means that the student's protected, because students have the absolute right and responsibility to advocate for themselves. And we want to make sure that we protect that along the way.
So in terms of what I mentioned before about ease of communication, if there is a conflict, absolutely put it in writing. I tell all of my students about that too. I like to think that I'm a good teacher, but if I do something that's wrong or that offends somebody, I want them to know who they can go to if that's the case. It's not been so yet, but here's my department chair's email address, right? This is where you get in touch with people. I got in the habit of doing that working with our graduate population, right? Because they teach for us sometimes too. If you have a question that you don't feel comfortable coming to me with, right? I work with, I'm a white guy. I work with a lot of people who don't necessarily look like me, and I don't share some of their experiences. There are other people that I can point them to as a resource. So, but if there is a conflict, I would absolutely say put that in writing. Like Dr. Ludwise said, the dean of students is a pretty safe one in terms of where to go, but that following that chain, because those questions will come back to us, not necessarily in a negative way, but if the question goes to the department chair is going to come back and ask me about the situation too, right? They're going to want my understanding of it. So having put it in writing, this is what I see happening, doing so in a non-confrontational or a non-accusatory way is best. But yeah, put it in print.
And I'll also add, if your student is concerned that it is not comfortable writing a department chair, the dean of students does have a form that they can fill out that goes to the dean of students office. And so, it puts their information in it, but it puts that layer in between it as well, as Dustin was saying. So there are lots of different mechanisms that your student can communicate their concerns, and they really should feel free to do so. But I will also say that your student should also be open to that there are lots of different solutions to a concern. And so when you come to the point where we're trying to talk about things like that, sometimes we have to be open to solutions that maybe we didn't think of in solving a problem or a conflict that's going on.
I'm going to apologize. They're vacuuming outside my office if you hear the vacuum cleaner. It's that time of the evening. But it's a lot of our students, right? They haven't maybe had to navigate conflict on their own quite yet. And we see that. And roommate issues in housing too. So a lot of times having those conversations, because the easy thing is to want to go to someone else before trying to have conversation if you can, based on what the conflict is, right? And your comfort level, but trying to encourage your student to think of ways that they could have a conversation, because I think that they'll grow a lot from it, and be able to experience that a little bit more in the future if they have conflict, that they can help manage that.
There are lots of advocates that they have access to as well. I mean, you know, going to the advisor and asking questions. Hey, this is what's going on. How should I write this up? How should I engage with this conversation? Looking for that advice from those advocates is really helpful. Sometimes it's another professor. You know, they've got an FYA professor that they're connecting well with. Go to that person and say, hey, you know, something's going on in one of my other classes. Can I ask you about the situation and get your advice on it? That makes that process of engaging with that other professor, that other instructor, so much easier, because they've had a chance to sound through some of that, and they got some advice on how to communicate in a way that's going to be more effective too. So they shouldn't feel like they have to do it alone by any stretch.
I actually know too, I think the Academic Success Center offers one-on-one meetings with students well, they offer them on a variety of topics, but one of them actually is conversations with professors if they're wanting just to have some advice, or just in general start working through what that should be like, you know, even thinking about their writing in general versus using their text language. Or I got told in a message the other day that I was goated. I didn't know what that meant. So apparently it meant that I was pretty cool, is what I learned through having to do some research with our students, right? But, you know, just generally about how to have conversations, whether that's professionally or navigating that conflict. I think the Academic Success Center can help with that too. If they're like me, I had to Google what goated meant. So fun fact for those of you on the call this evening, if you didn't know that word, enjoy Googling it, but it's nothing bad. It was all good things. So that was good. I know one of the things we hear from students a lot, right, is a lot of the times a teacher has a teaching style and a student perceives that they have one way of learning, their learning style, right? What is maybe advice on how students can, one, start to maybe adapt, or also work with their instructor if they feel like they're struggling to learn in the way the instruction is going at the same time?
I can give you the first hand on this, and maybe Dr. Cohn and Dr. Ludwise can weigh in on that side of it as well as from a higher level. Teaching and learning is a relationship. So it's not something that is purely unidirectional. You know, if a student isn't learning in the style that I'm presenting, I can only know that in two ways. One, they don't perform well on their assessments, or two, they tell me. And I think, you know, entering into that kind of conversation, I'm struggling with this. You know, traditionally, I've kind of learned in this way. What can I do to kind of come together with you on this, so we can meet somewhere in the middle for it? Most people are going to be pretty flexible when it comes to that you've been approached in this relationship environment to say, yeah, I really am more of an auditory learner, and there's a lot of reading here. What's some advice that you've got for me? Have you got another student that struggled with this? What did they do? I mean, ask us questions about what we've done before. We'll talk all day. But, you know, where can we kind of come together on it rather than one side changing for the other? It's really got to be about the development of that relationship, almost as a one-to-one. And sometimes that means additional office hours, right? Getting together to finally figure out how that works together. That's why I use a lot of my office hours for, is to help students see, right, this is where I'm coming from, this is where you're coming from, here's how we can come together and converge so we can get that learning done in a genuine way. Sometimes, I mean, it may be understanding that I need to ask questions early on in the semester, right? It may be a class that I got during drop ad and it was great for my schedule, but it doesn't really work for my style. Maybe I should look at a different class for that. I think we get a lot of that in delivery, right? So I signed up for these online classes thinking it was going to be easier because they're online, and it turns out it's the same amount of work, but now I've got to do everything in writing, and so some of it, you know, face to face. So I think being able to be a little bit self-reflective early on about where those strengths are, and putting yourself in a position to say, I'm not gonna put all my eggs in one basket. I'm gonna spread this out and try a couple of different things. I'm gonna be flexible and work with somebody to get part way. I think is where that's got to start at. Now, there may be other things to add on to that too, but that's always been the start for me.
I think sometimes also that students, part of it's a conversation with faculty, right? Foreign language classes are taught a certain way, and there's a lot of oral conversation. There's a lot of conversation and instruction in the target language. And so that's often very uncomfortable for students. And that's part of sort of expanding that they're learning a little bit. But as Dustin said, that's a conversation as well, right? Having a conversation with the instructor about, I'm a little bit of an introvert, this is uncomfortable for me, how do I get more comfortable with it? Science labs are often taught in a certain way, and people have to report out in a very certain, highly structured format. We offer workshops and seminars actually free of charge to help students learn some of those talents, so that they're a lot more comfortable with adjusting their learning style a little bit, given the parameters of the course as well. And so I think that there's a lot of give and take in the learning experience, but I also think that we provide a lot of supports for that. And again, it's being willing to go to your academic advisor or your instructor or the Academic Success Center and just ask for those supports.
I think you mentioned something, right? The student wanting to come forward and try to find a way to be more comfortable with that subject matter or the way. I think part of this too is trying to encourage your students to use what, of course, we coin as their growth mindset, right? So always, right, math, you always hear this through SOAR orientation. I'm horrible at math. That's always the sentence I hear. And I say, in that sense with right now, right, that there's this opportunity to keep learning and keep growing. And that's part of the collegiate experience. You didn't come to college because you already were good at everything or already knew everything. You came because it's time to learn. And I was not good at a lot of things in Dustin's area. That was the majority of subjects I struggled, right? But if I came into it with, that's why I'm here, is to get better at it. It'll also help with, I think, a lot of Dr. Ludwise, maybe what you guys see even through like the early alert process, which we might want to explain what that is for faculty for some classes, but this instant defeated feeling that our students might be feeling, and it's because they're using a lot of that language that makes them feel like they can't continue on. So just a suggestion for supporters on that side. But Dr. Ludwise, do you want to share a little bit about like early alerts and what that looks like?
Sure. And I actually, before I talk about early alerts, I do want to say, and I just had this conversation with one of my students, and it was a really good conversation. And I think, but remember, your student is going to college because your student did really well in high school. And many of our students were the top of their class in high school. They were very, they're the smartest in the room, they're everything. Well, when you bring them all together into one place, they're not all the smartest in the room anymore. And that's often a hard learning curve for students. And to feel comfortable, that becomes very defensive, that becomes very reactionary in some ways. And it feels very defeatist, right? I was always the smartest person and I'm not, so I'm stupid now. And that's part of the mindset that we have to work with them through. Academic alerts are actually to give us an opportunity to have that conversation, right? Academic alerts we do very early in the semester, each semester start at about week 3 and go to right before midterm. And this is an opportunity for students who are having or struggling in some way and maybe have not felt comfortable reaching out to their instructor or their advisor to get sort of that heads up. Hey, I noticed that you're struggling in these areas. Maybe it's attendance, maybe it's you're not turning in things, maybe there's a host of them, maybe you're not engaging in class, and giving sort of that red flag that says, hey, let's have a conversation about this. You are on a path where you might not be successful at the end of the semester, but we can still write that. Please talk to me so we can have a conversation about how I can best support you and how the institution can support you in your academic goals. And so, you know, I think it's perfectly fine. Those are done mostly in core classes. We are changing the policy a little bit to include some particularly sophomore level classes. But I think that's a good opportunity to have a conversation with students. Hey, so have you heard from any of your advisors or instructors that maybe, you know, did you get any academic alerts this year? Is actually a good starting point for a conversation about week 3 or 4 of the semester. Getting back to sort of those times where people might want to check in with their students.
It takes some time to put those in. So when the instructor is putting in those alerts, it's not something punitive. I mean, take that activity as a demonstration of the fact that they care about your student recovering. It's not to point out this is a failure or this is penalized. There's no CYA in this. It's really to indicate, hey, I'm telling you, you need to come and talk to me about this. So it is that extension, that proactive instance of saying, I want to fix this with you. Otherwise, we just wouldn't hear anything.
And what I will say is your student will not only hear from their faculty member at that point in time, they'll likely hear from their academic advisor reaching out. They may hear from an academic success coach who's working with a population. Student athlete services, if your student is a student athlete, they'll hear from their student athlete services advisor. We have an entire team of people besides the faculty member who are going to reach out and say, hey, you need to talk to your faculty member about their concerns in their class.
And a big part of that, I'm going to say, check your email to the students. I don't know. I think I'm going to say that till I turn blue in the face. But really encourage your students to check their email. And I know right now more than ever, of course, during COVID, it's like our most prime way of communication. But a lot of those things do come that way as an initial outreach. Doesn't mean it can't be a phone call, can't be something else. But the olive branch sometimes extends first in email if possible. So definitely encouraging your student to check their email.
While you're talking about email, I'd like to just add that, you know, we get a lot of emails from parents, and that's all well and good that we can, you know, understand that you're concerned and we can start to look into something. But if a student, if it's, you know, they want to appeal a grade or whatever, we have to have something from the student. And too often I get an email from a parent and say, but I don't want my student to know that I'm emailing you. Well, there are only a certain number of things we can do to assist without the student giving us permission to move forward. So if it's you know, we need to look into a grade and maybe there was an error in reporting the grade and it needs changed, but we can't do that because a parent emailed us. We have to have the student say, hey, there's a problem, I think, with my grade. Can you look into this? This is what I think is going on, or what I want you to check on. So while we do respond to the parents and we'll initiate a certain level of review, there are a lot of times when the student has to reach out to us. So, you know, parent might initiate it and say, okay, and then we email the student with the questions that we need to ask and follow through with the student. But we do have to have student permission to do some of those things. So we would request that the student be involved.
I know we get a lot of emails too. And I think part of it I get from a lot of the moms and dads, which is I feel the pain of they're not going to do that if I ask them to. And I'm like, oh, I hear you. I hear you. But no, too, here in family programs, like you reach out to us and we can try to talk through some creative ways to guide them in that direction if needed, or get your student connected to, you know, the appropriate resources that they need. So I know I've been on many phone calls for many long times with parents as they're talking through that. Because it can be frustrating because you know you would advocate for something, right? But maybe your student is struggling to do that or doesn't see the value in it. And so that might be something that we can provide support to as well. Very definite challenge of the students coming to college at that point when a lot does ride on them at the end of the day. So good point. Well, we are running up on time. So I just wanted to give the opportunity for any of our panelists to give any parting wisdom, thoughts, any of those things for our supporters. Of course, those that might be with us live right now, but also any that might be watching this recording after the fact. any tips of advice or words of wisdom for you?
Well, I know they repeat this at SOAR over and over, but I would just like to remind the parents to encourage their student to take a full load. Too oftentimes, the things that I get, the student has had to drop, then they drop below a full-time student status, or they get to be their senior year and they're running one course short, 3 credits short because they didn't take a full load. So we can have parents help us advocate that students need to be taking a full load of courses while they're here at Georgia Southern.
I think what I'd like to leave you with is as parents, you're part of our community too. We're partners in sort of this educational journey your students are on. And so whatever we can do to be helpful, to maybe ease your mind a bit, we're happy to do so. But as Dr. Cohn said, a lot of times we have to work very closely with your student, but your support is invaluable, both to your student and to us. And so please let us know how we can be of assistance to you as we continue this journey together with your student. And I appreciate you allowing me to have a conversation with you tonight.
Dustin, anything from you?
I've never been accused of having words of wisdom.
I had a feeling you would have plenty.
No, I mean, you've already won. 90% of the game of success is being present, and you're here, whether you're watching live or you're reviewing this and you've got to this point in the session, you're here. And I think modeling that behavior with your students, right? And there, you can be present, whether it's virtual, you can be present, whether it's live, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's remote. There are a lot of different ways to be present, but key to that is asking questions and listening to the answers and thinking about flexible solutions. And the more that you can model that with them, letting them talk through those things with you and giving that kind of sound feedback that, again, is open-minded and flexible, we'll always work towards solutions, right? Especially if we have options, and seeing someone bring those to us just goes a tremendous amount for us. So, but I mean, you got to be there to do that. And again, there are lots of different ways to be there, but if you're there, it's so much easier for us.
Great. All the good wisdom. See, this is who we always need to come to for the Georgia Southern wisdom. So this was perfect. I appreciate our panelists joining us this evening. Thank you so very much. Just a reminder, we do have one more monthly Zoom session happening this semester with housing. Same place, the event website off of the main Georgia Southern site for parents and families. Also, you can email us at any time that you need anything. I promise you. Shivani, who's the one that's been in the chat, she's on that email every day. So am I. We're also just a quick phone call away. So we can be reached at familyprograms@georgiasouthern.edu. Or, of course, as we mentioned earlier, you can join us on Facebook at Georgia Southern Family Programs. But we're here for you. This is our jobs, literally in family programs. We live to be here for you and support you. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out to us. If we don't have the answer, we'll get you connected. And that's part of why we're doing these sessions, is to make sure we bring this information to you. So thank you again, and we hope everybody has a good rest of their evening. Thank you all.